Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we're going to continue with our story, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, Sherlock Holmes Christmas. And this is one of many Sherlock Holmes stories written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And, of course, this one involves Christmas, and we're talking about this particular story because Christmas is coming soon.
That's right. So this story, as you remember, involves a goose, and inside the goose is this jewel, this blue carbuncle, that was stolen from a noble's hotel room. And Holmes and his friend Dr. Watson, well, they have to figure out who stole the jewel and, how it happened, because that's what a detective does, right? They try and solve the facts of the mystery, and then, of course, the police don't have the pressure on them, and everyone can hopefully have a Merry Christmas.
Indeed. So we've got other people involved here. We've got Mr. Ryder, the hotel manager, and then we've got the plumber, whose name is...
John Horner.
John Horner, exactly. So those are some other characters involved in this story. And finally, before we said goodbye last time, we were introduced to Mr. Baker, who's actually the owner of the hat and of the goose. But remember, Mr. Holmes and Sherlock Holmes deduced or concluded that Mr. Baker had no knowledge of the crime. So they're going to figure out where this goose came from and how the jewel got inside the goose. So in today's lesson, we're going to continue with our story. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's read through the entire contents, and then we'll be right back to discuss it. Mr. Baker acquired his goose from a pub, so Holmes and Watson head there first. The landlord tells them he purchased all his geese from a market trader, so they head to the market. However, when Holmes questions the merchant about his supplier, the man reacts angrily. Apparently, he has been bothered by other people making inquiries about his geese. Holmes tricks the man into revealing the necessary information, but as he and Watson are about to depart, they see someone else talking to the vendor. It turns out to be James Ryder, the manager of the hotel from which the blue carbuncle was stolen. Holmes invites Ryder back to Baker Street, where to Watson's astonishment, he tells Ryder that he knows everything. Ryder breaks down and confesses. He snatched the blue carbuncle himself and framed Horner for the crime. Then he visited his sister, who runs a goose farm. There, Ryder forced one goose with distinctive black bands on its tail to swallow the jewel, thinking to conceal it there while the police investigation ran its course. Unfortunately, his plan went awry when his sister sold the goose containing the jewel to the market trader. Holmes had worked all this out and now has the villain at his mercy. However, Holmes lets Ryder go. He is motivated by the seasonal spirit of forgiveness and also the belief that saving Ryder from prison will keep him honest in the future. He then persuades the police to let Horner go, returning him to his family for Christmas. Finally, he sits down with Watson to enjoy a delicious Christmas dinner. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue with our summary, and where we left off last time, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were venturing out onto the chilly streets of London, trying to figure out where this goose came from. So, again, we got Mr. Baker. He's the owner of the hat and the goose, but he knows nothing of this crime. And here is what Holmes and Watson were able to figure out. Mr. Baker acquired his goose from a pub, so Holmes and Watson head there first.
Right. The landlord, or the owner of the pub, tells them he purchased all the geese from a market trader, so they head to the market. Okay, and a landlord will be, basically a landlord is someone who owns land. Okay, so here the landlord is the owner of the pub, and he got the geese from a market trader.
So again, they're tracing the clues here. They're looking back and trying to figure out where the goose came from and how the goose ended up having a jewel inside it. So again, this is the owner of the pub, the landlord, and he says, well, fellows, I got the goose from a market trader. So of course, the trader is somebody who works in a market and sells geese to various people, so they decided to head to the market where the trader got the goose in the first place. However, when Holmes questions the merchant about his supplier, the man reacts angrily. So there's all sorts of different transactions going on when you sell items in a country. They go through traders and merchants and suppliers and things like that. So, of course, Holmes was trying to figure out the supplier where that person got the goose, but the man reacted angrily. Why do you want to know this? Why are you asking me this? This is none of your business.
Apparently, he has been bothered by other people making inquiries about his geese. Okay, so he's an angry goose guy. We could just call him that. So he has been bothered by other people. Okay, when you bother someone, of course, you annoy them. And some people are easily bothered or easily annoyed. So other people were making inquiries about his geese. If you make an inquiry about something, you basically ask questions about it. Okay, so if you're looking for something and you say you lost something, you might go to lots of people and say, "Oh, have you seen this thing that I lost? I lost my notebook. Do you know where it is? Or I lost my cell phone. Can you help me find it?" So you might go ask a lot of people about this thing. You make inquiries about it. You're trying to find out information or find out more things about it if you've lost something, let's say.
Right, and remember the verb is to inquire. You're asking for information. I'd like to inquire about your summer courses. I want to take a class or something like that. I want to inquire about them. And then the noun form is inquiry or inquiry. You can pronounce it either way. So, of course, let's see, the merchant here, he's kind of upset because so many people have been asking him about his geese. They've been making inquiries or inquiries about his geese. Why do so many people want to know about my geese? I'm getting sick of answering these questions. Well, of course, Holmes is a master detective, so he tricks the man into revealing the necessary information. Using some tricks in conversation and things like that, Holmes is still able to get the information that he needs. But as he and Watson are about to leave, or as they are about to depart, they see someone else talking to the vendor. Depart just means to leave. Depart is kind of a formal word, like what time does the train depart? Well, it departs at 1:15, so you better get there early. And a departure, of course, is the noun. But they're going to depart, but then as they're leaving, they see someone else talking to the vendor. A vendor, of course, is somebody who sells something.
That's right. At a night market, of course, which are very popular here in Taiwan. Everybody loves to go to the night market. There are vendors at the night market. There might be the sausage vendor. That's the guy that's grilling up sausage, or the steamed buns or the fried up buns. That vendor there will be making those for people. And of course, the vendor is it's a business person, right? So they're always, they might be being loud, trying to sell their things, like, "Oh, come here, come try my sausage, come have my pearl milk tea," things like that. $10, right? So this is sort of the sounds that a vendor will make here. And so, right, so Holmes and Watson, what do they see? They see someone else talking to the vendor. It turns out to be James Ryder. Okay. This is interesting, right? So, right, they were just talking to James Ryder earlier. He's the manager of the hotel from which the blue carbuncle was stolen. And then it's very strange because they're at this market talking to this goose guy, this goose merchant, and James Ryder shows up. Well, that seems like a very interesting coincidence.
It does seem like an interesting coincidence. Why would the hotel manager be talking with this guy at the market there? It doesn't make much sense there. And again, this is the manager of the hotel talking to the vendor at the market. And of course, that's where the goose was purchased. And the hotel, of course, is where the blue carbuncle was stolen. Now, moving on to the next paragraph here, it says, Holmes invites Ryder back to Baker Street, which is where he lives, where to Watson's astonishment, he tells Ryder that he knows everything. So I guess Dr. Watson did not expect Sherlock Holmes to tell Ryder everything he knew. Usually as a detective, you keep that information to yourself until the suspect starts to reveal things, and then you let them know that you know what happened. So yes, Dr. Watson was kind of really surprised here. Astonishment is the state of being very surprised or astonished. To astonish, of course, is the verb, and the noun form is astonishment. And this pattern here is like to someone's astonishment, which means that person was very surprised.
Right. So, to Watson's astonishment, he tells Ryder that he knows everything. Okay, so it's interesting because a lot of the times in these Sherlock Holmes stories, Holmes figures it out. But since Dr. Watson is the one who's kind of telling the story, he doesn't really know, and we as readers probably don't really know either. So we have to wait for kind of the mystery for Holmes to tell us how he solved this crime or how he got all these clues to know what's going on. He tells Ryder that he knows everything. Ryder breaks down and confesses. Okay, so Holmes knows that Ryder does it, and well, did Ryder do it? Well, he breaks down. If you break down, you kind of lose it, let's say. When a person breaks down, they might start crying. They might be shaking a little bit. They might feel very nervous. They lose control of their emotions, you might say. So Ryder breaks down and confesses. When you confess, you kind of admit to something. You admit to doing something wrong a lot of the time. So here he confesses that he stole the blue carbuncle. Now again, this phrase break down, people can break down, but also cars can break down. Machines can break down, right? That means when something stops working, it also breaks down.
And it also means you start dancing vigorously. This reminds me, of course, of Curtis Blow's The Breaks. These are the breaks. Break it up, break it up, break it up, break down. Yeah, start dancing and have a great time. And I did mention the phrase break up there, which means a boy and a girl no longer go out together. They break up, and therefore the boy and the girl are now available to date other people. But in this particular case, he broke down. He could no longer continue to lie. I confess, I've been a terrible fool. Yes, it is me. It is I. I'm the one who stole the jewel. Okay, that's where we're going to take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是12月份 Unit4 The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle A Sherlock Holmes Christmas Mystery 第2天的课程。欢迎大家一起回来跟着福尔摩斯破案，看看到底蓝宝石是怎么被偷走的。现在我们一起看看学习重点。在第一段，请同学注意到哦，这一整段呢，老师要请同学帮我拿着荧光笔把一些字圈起来。为什么呢？因为你会看到不同的字，可是其实指的是同一个人。那同学要注意到，在做阅读测验或者你们自己在读小说的时候，千万不要被这些眼花缭乱的字而搞混了。我们一定要确认说，他们指称的对象到底是谁。因为英文里面呢，其实他们会避免一直用同样的一个字，所以呢，常常会看到不同的字，可是指称的对象是一样的。首先，第2句的这个 market trader， 再来第3句的 the merchant， 再来第4句的代名词 he， 以及第5句的 the man， 然后呢，还有第5句稍微后面一点的 the vendor， 其实指的都是同一个人，是谁呢？就是这里我们看到他就是在卖鹅的人。好，那接下来请同学注意到，我们知道说福尔摩斯他是到市场去向鹅贩打听。那接下来我们就看到我刚刚所指的这些呢，其实都是指市场的鹅贩。好，那同学请注意到，看到第5句，老师现在呢要跟大家说明几个重要的单字还有片语。首先呢，就是第5句的 tricks the man into revealing。 trick someone into doing something， 就是骗什么人做什么事。所以福尔摩斯呢，他骗了这个鹅贩就是想办法让这个鹅贩呢上当，然后呢说出了他所需要的资讯。那接下来同一句后面这个 He and Watson are about to depart。 好，请同学注意到 be about to depart， 这个呢等于是现在代替未来，就是他和 Watson 呢准备要离开了，刚好要离开了。They see someone else talking to the vendor。好，那接着再请看到第6句的 It turns out to。It turns out to 呢，就是结果呢是怎么样，后来的演变是怎么样。好，那请同学注意到，老师请大家回到第4句哦。其实第4句还有一个重点，就是 make inquiries 这个片语，它其实是打听的意思。好，那接着我们看到第2段，福尔摩斯他突破了饭店经理 James Ryder 的心房。Ryder breaks down and confesses。confesses 这个字呢，请同学画起来，其实蛮重要的，就是招认的意思。招认的意思，认罪。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue with our explanation. It seems that Sherlock Holmes has actually solved the crime, but there's more to the story as the story continues during Christmas time.
Right. So we know that he invited Ryder, Mr. Ryder, back to 221B Baker Street. That's where Holmes lives and has an office. And basically, Holmes says that, well, I know you did it. And Ryder, well, he breaks down and he confesses. He snatched the blue carbuncle himself and framed Horner for the crime. Okay, if you snatch something, here snatch, it's a verb. It kind of means to grab, to take. Like you want to steal something, you might snatch it. You kind of grab it very, very quickly, and then you might hide it and put it away. Okay, so, right, if you're, say your friend has a cookie, and he turns his head and you really want the cookie, you might snatch it really quickly before he can see, and then you eat it. Of course, you shouldn't steal things from your friend, but just saying, that's one way that you might think of snatching something. So He snatched the blue carbuncle himself and framed Horner for the crime. When you frame someone, it kind of means you set them up. You make it look like they did it. When you were the one who did it. So you kind of make them look guilty. And remember, in the beginning, the police thought that Horner was guilty of the crime because, well, he had a previous conviction for theft. He stole something before. So it's kind of the easy explanation. Oh, well, Horner stole something before, so he's probably the one who did it.
Right, and of course the plumber was in the room and the jewel was in the room, so yes, indeed, it seems that Mr. Ryder can easily frame Mr. Horner for the crime. He can make it look like Mr. Horner committed the crime, and so again we have the verb to frame someone to make it look like they committed the crime, and then you can continue to be free while someone else is punished for your crime. Now here's what happened next. Then he visited his sister who runs a goose farm. Again, we're talking about Mr. Ryder here, the manager of the hotel. He stole the blue carbuncle, he snatched it, and then he went to visit his sister. And his sister happens to run a goose farm. You raise geese on a farm so that you can sell them and make money.
There, Ryder forced one goose with distinctive black bands on its tail to swallow the jewel. Okay, this sounds very cruel. So he found a goose. Okay, a goose, and well, this goose had distinctive black bands. Something that's distinctive is a characteristic or a trait that makes it look different, or it might make it stand out a little bit. So maybe all the geese in this goose farm they might be like one color or they look a certain way, but this one goose in particular has these special black bands on its tail. So that when you see this one goose, you'll know that's the one, okay? You can kind of identify it, or you can kind of point it out very easily because of these special markings, these distinctive markings. And so what Ryder did was he made this goose swallow the jewel, thinking to conceal it there while the police investigation ran its course.
Right, so these are black bands or lines on the goose that are distinctive. They're unique. They're characteristic of this goose, and none of the other geese have these black bands. So maybe there are hundreds or thousands of geese there, but they can still tell which one is the goose that has the carbuncle inside of it. I guess they're assuming here that the goose will not poop it out later on, or maybe the jewel will end up inside an egg or something like that when the goose lays eggs. If it's a female goose, I'm not quite sure there, but in any case, I guess the goose will stay inside of the goose. The jewel will stay inside the goose there, and of course they can hide it there or conceal it, and hopefully it will be concealed there while the police investigation ran its course. So if something runs its course, it just keeps going and going and going until it finishes, and yes, I guess they're just waiting for the police to ask a bunch of questions and talk to various witnesses, and that will occur over several days, and eventually the police will get tired and not do any more investigation.
Okay, unfortunately, his plan went awry when his sister sold the goose containing the jewel to the market trader. Right, that could be a problem, right? If your sister doesn't really know that she shouldn't sell the goose with the distinctive black bands, and your goose gets sold, that means your jewel is, of course, going away with the goose, right? Because the goose was sold. So his plan went awry. When something goes awry, it kind of means that it gets messed up. Something happens. If a plan goes awry, something happens to the plan where it doesn't really go how you wanted it to go. It gets messed up. Something gets confusing about it. It just doesn't work out the way that you wanted it to. So his plan went awry because his sister sold the goose containing the jewel to the market trader.
Yeah, when I was in high school, of course, I had a girlfriend. Her name was Sherry, but we got bored of each other and our relationship went awry. We eventually stopped seeing each other and we broke up. But in this particular case, the plan, well, it went awry. The plan just did not work out because the sister sold the goose which contained the jewel and she sold it to the market trader. I guess there were too many geese there. There were too many geese there for her to keep track of, and she forgot which goose was the one with the distinctive black bands on it. And Holmes is a smart fella. He had worked all this out. He had figured this all out. And now he had the villain at his mercy. The villain, of course, is the criminal, the person who has committed the crime. And if someone is at your mercy, that means you control them and you can do whatever you want with them. You can beat them, you can torture them, or in this case, you can send them to jail.
Right. Villain is a great word for bad guy. Who are some of the famous villains that people might know? Well, Lex Luthor is a famous villain, right? He's Superman's arch enemy. He's a good villain. Who are some other villains that you might be able to
The
think
Joker, he's a villain of Batman. The Riddler, the Penguin, those are villains of Batman. And, of course, Dr. Octopus is a villain of Spider-Man. There are various villains in comic books, and there are probably other ones in different kinds of stories as well.
That's right. Okay, let's finish up with our last paragraph here. However, Holmes lets Ryder go. Interesting. Okay, so we know that Ryder is guilty. He broke down, but Holmes lets him go. He is motivated by the seasonal spirit of forgiveness, and also the belief that saving Ryder from prison will keep him honest in the future. Okay, so maybe Holmes is filled with this festive goodwill that we talked about in our last lesson, that it's Christmas time, and what do we do around the holidays? Well, we try to forgive other people. So he forgives Ryder for committing this crime, and he believes that if Ryder doesn't go to prison, maybe it will help him stay honest in the future.
Indeed. So maybe Mr. Ryder did not have a criminal record before that. He was just consumed by desire to make some money off that jewel just this one time. And Sherlock Holmes thinks that, he's the manager of the hotel. He won't do this again. So again, he's motivated by the spirit of forgiveness. And he thinks that, yes, Mr. Ryder will be honest in the future. He then persuades the police to let Horner go, returning him to his family for Christmas. So remember, Horner was the plumber, and Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes had the information about Mr. Horner, and Sherlock Holmes persuaded the police to let Horner go. He's not guilty. He did not commit this crime, and so Mr. Horner, the plumber, could spend Christmas with his family.
Finally, he sits down with Watson to enjoy a delicious Christmas dinner.Okay, so right, it's Christmas time. You want to sit down with your friends and family and enjoy a delicious Christmas dinner. Maybe it has a goose. Maybe there's a goose on the table or ham. Other things that are popular to eat at Christmas time. And Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, they sit down together to enjoy this Christmas dinner.And
they lived happily ever after. Okay, that brings us to the end of our summary for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
同学，我们接着看第二段。第二段的第三句 ，He snatched the blue carbuncle himself and framed Horner for the crime。好，所以其实并不是 Horner 偷了这个蓝宝石的 ，Horner 是被栽赃的。请同学把 frame 这个字画起来 ，frame 在这里是当作动词，所以就是他是被栽赃的。Horner was framed， 请注意。再来，请同学看到第五题，第五句 ，There rider forced one goose with distinctive block bands on his tail。好 ，on its tail 这个句子在最后面呢有一个片语 ，ran its course。好，这句话这个片语是什么意思？英文解释其实是 to develop and finish naturally。我们可以说就是顺其自然发展结束。好，所以整句话的意思是说 ，Rider 找了一只鹅，它特色非常的鲜明，尾巴上面有黑色的条纹。然后 Rider 硬把宝石塞进这个鹅的肚子里，他打算先把宝石藏在它的肚子里，然后呢，等警方调查结束。好，那我们再回来看到 ran its course， 有没有其他的这个例句可以帮助同学学会这个片语呢？请注意听哦。The doctor's advice is to let the fever.Run its course. The doctor's advice is to let the fever run its course. 那我们有些时候在台湾因为健保非常的方便，所以很多人呢，只要生病就会去找医生拿药。那有时候有些医生可能会说这个并没有大碍，就让你烧自然的烧起来，然后再去退烧就好。这个就是这个意思哦。The doctor's advice is to let the fever run its course.好，再来，请同学看到第六句有一个片语 His plan went awry， 请把 went awry 画起来。这句话的意思是原本的计划出了差错。再来，请看到第七句 Holmes 到 at his mercy 这个句子。那这个 at his mercy 这个片语也请同学特别注意，其实是指一切都在福尔摩斯的掌控当中。那这个人呢，也任凭他处置。再来，请看到第三段。第三段的第一句Holmes lets Rider go， 意思是什么？就是他放过他一马。不过 let someone go 也有解雇人、老板解雇人的意思，请同学记得哦。好，再来第二句，请看到 is motivated， 这里指的 he， 那当然指的就是福尔摩斯。好，这整句的话的意思是说，圣诞节宽恕的精神是在皆大欢喜。那而且呢，福尔摩斯他也相信说 Rider 这一次免于牢狱之灾，以后呢会老老实实的。好，以上就是我们第二天的中文讲解，谢谢大家。
Okay, well, that's it for today's lesson. Thank you for joining us. But remember, we have one more day to talk about the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, a Sherlock Holmes Christmas mystery. So please join us for that. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.